Why focus on urban disaster risk reduction? Again, Anup has mentioned a lot about how vulnerable cities are, but the important thing is that cities really concentrate all these three things: people, economic activity, capital, technology, institutions, culture. It's a combination of these components which come together in cities, and that is where the impact is much more than if it is a rural area or an area which is not so urbanized. The kind of urban density that we have in India is shocking. It's even more than China, as you can see here. What is very important to consider here is the kind of increase that is happening to those villages which were large villages, and slowly they are getting urbanized and turning into cities. So it's not about only large cities. It's about the largest urbanization process is going on in those settlements which were villages before. What does that mean? That means that these cities are not prepared in terms of their institutional systems to handle the urbanized form that they find themselves in. They are still institutionally, in most cases, still functioning as villages. So there you have a mismatch, where you have settlements which have really got urbanized, but fundamentally they have been villages. So just some stark figures which can really bring forward the issue why we are really talking about urban disaster risk reduction, that India will add at least 300 million new people to its cities in 30 years, which is a huge number. This is on top of the current urban population of 300 million, of whom over 70 million are poor. So going by the statistics that we consider, this is the number of people who are poor, urban poor, by the way. And in 2031, there are 3 of 10 largest megacities in the world will be in India: Delhi, Mumbai and Kolkata, and over 70 other cities will have a population of over 1 million. So this last point is very important. These are the cities which are fast urbanizing, which were not really big cities before, but are gradually becoming cities and will have more than 1 million population. So this just shows how many urban centers, and you can really see how the urban, what is the kind of growth rate of urban settlements in India. And this is a projection for 2031. It also is very interesting to note how the gap between the rural GDP and the urban GDP is growing. So which means that if disasters are going to strike, it's not just the people who are going to die, the economic impact is going to be huge. So this is just an interesting point here, that the top 100 largest cities are estimated to produce about 43% of the GDP, with 16% of the population and just 0.24% of the land area. So just see how much concentration is going to be there. It's just 0.24% of the land area, and it's going to have 43% of the GDP. What are Indian cities of today like? What are they like? This gives a glimpse of how Mumbai looks. There's a stark contrast. You have this massive urban sprawl or some traditional settlement. There are huge multi-storied complexes that are there. There are cities, not one city. There are different types of cities within one city. So you can't say there is just one city that's existing. This is a photograph of Delhi. Again, shows the stark contrast that we have within one city. This is a small stretch within which we conduct our case studies. This is Okla area, and this looks like just a very, very tiny portion of the city. So I'm just going to show you some slides which will just show you how diverse is just this little small area. So you can see this is one stretch of that area where you have these kind of sprouted development coming up. Lot of informal settlements. You can see the kind of informal growth that has happened. Within the same area, now we are just along the same stretch along river Yamuna, just a small stretch. This is again Abul Fazl enclave. If you go inside, then this is a certain different section of in the same area. The earlier one was much poorer population. Even their socio-religious profiles are different. Are we prepared to handle disasters in such situations? What will happen in case there is a fire in the petrol pump, or if there is an earthquake and the gas pipeline breaks up? What will happen? And then of course we cannot forget about urban homeless who are there, who are not really traceable as a physical form, but they are also there in the same area. We are dealing with cities within city which are so diverse, and we have institutional systems for disaster risk reduction where disaster risk management is seen as a separate sector. Now I want to question that. Can we really afford to have disaster risk management seen separately? We have top-down systems, Anup already explained, at national, state, district management authorities, very well organized. It seems very nicely plan. But just think about the reality of the city. How incredibly complex it is, how incredibly diverse it is. Is it possible to manage that kind of reality with these kind of top-down systems? It's something that we need to question. But we don't talk so much about vulnerabilities that create risks to the cities. The fourth point is also very important, that municipalities are technically and financially weak, especially for rapidly urbanizing small and medium-sized cities. Remember, I said that these cities are not cities originally. They have been small villages or large villages which are slowly becoming cities. Paradox is that we have a lot of NGOs in our country, we have very good community-based initiatives, but many times they happen in parallel. You know, there is no coinciding between the top-down, which are very formally organized systems, and the bottom-up approaches. This is a challenge I want to also highlight, which we have and we need to really address. And that is that on one hand, we have an urban development sector, which is very nicely organized around environment, services, land use planning, housing, public transport. So you have that. And on the other hand, what we are doing? We are creating another disaster management sector. And then there is a gap between the two. Now this is ironical. What we really need to do is how best can we mainstream disaster management in all the sectors that are already there. You need to integrate disaster management in land use planning, as Anup already mentioned, in public transport, in housing. That's the only way we will be able to manage disaster risk management. So can we have a comprehensive disaster risk management plan for such complex urban environments? My answer to that is a very big no. Simply because the diversity is so huge, the challenges are so diverse, and the kind of risks are very different. What is it that needs to be integrated in an integrated urban disaster risk reduction? The approach is that we want to focus on multiple hazards to which cities are exposed. If an earthquake happens, there will be landslides. If landslide, there might be some fires that may happen as a result of earthquake. So we cannot just look at fire as a separate field, earthquake as a separate field, landslide as a separate field. We have to really start looking at the connections between various hazards, because that's what really creates risks to cities. We need to address, and that's still missing, linkage between physical, social, economic and institutional vulnerabilities. So we have very good engineers, but they are not really trained to look at the social aspects or the institutional aspects. On the other hand, we might have people who are dealing with the social vulnerabilities, but they may not be able to understand or have a link with the technical people. I'll just end by this two slides which talk about the existing gaps in disaster research in and on India. One thing is that surprisingly disaster research in India has predominantly focused on rural settlements. It's very surprising. Looking at the kind of risks that we have, the focus has still now been a lot on rural areas. We still have a lot to do in the urban disaster risk management area. The second is, it has tended to focus exclusively on physical, social or economic aspects, but lack integration between these. And the third point is also important, long-term perspective is missing, especially on post-disaster recovery and reconstruction. Whenever there's a disaster, everybody goes there and does a research, and there's a lot of media glare. Then we move to the next disaster and we forget about it. Today, if you go back to Latur, what happened 20 years ago, probably you'll learn much more about what worked and what didn't work, rather than having a very short-term, short-focused approach. So agenda for research and practice. We need to really develop tools and methodologies for integrated urban disaster risk assessment and management, especially for rapidly urbanizing small and medium-sized towns in India. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. We still have not done much with regards to tools and methodologies. And lastly, the innovative integrated approaches engaging multiple stakeholders should be there, which mainstreams disaster risk reduction into urban management practices, especially targeting vulnerable urban dwellers. So we need to have these various stakeholders. This is what we try to promote here through Practica-based research and action to really deal with these diversities of cities and do urban disaster risk reduction from not a very standardized model, fit for all approach, but something which is really targeting the diverse reality of our city.